Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Scranton Cultural Center of Shadoe Steele from Saturday Night Live with the Oldies, one of the longest-running oldie shows in America since 1980. Glad to be here. Glad you're here as well. Thank you. My second time of 3 concerts. The first concert with the Glass Prism was held on a Saturday and couldn't make it, but thank you all for coming. The year was 1970. And, of course, the Charles Manson, Kate LaBianca murders were yesterday's news. Man already walked on the moon, and Woodstock was just a muddy memory. And I was in my first year as a freshman at Pittston Area High School. And, of course, back then, the talk among many study halls, including Miss Reed's at the time, was music and girls, and not necessarily in that order. And at that time, a lot of folks were talking about the groups of the day, the AM radio hits and also the turntable hits, those songs that weren't played much on the radio, but you took them home and played them on your phonograph. That's a turntable hit. Mott the Hoople, The Mountain, and this brand new band who patterned their music after an Edgar Allan Poe poem. And I had to check this out, and the rumor then was around that these guys were from Scranton. Now, at that time, I didn't know anyone in the music business who would admit they were from Scranton at that time. But the Glass Prism blazed new trails back then. Now, of course, I had better things on my mind at the time, like, algebra and seeing if Susie Fisher would go to the Christmas semi-formal with me at Pittston area. But again, the programs selected for the Glass Prism were all over AM radio, and WRM was the only radio station in town at that time. It was a long time in between hits. And of course, the hits continued. And luckily, as an only child, my folks had a few more bucks than the average person, so I persuaded them to get me a $4.99 album at the Spruce Record Store in Scranton, of which they were sold out. So we went right down the street to the Globe Arcade where the Melody Disc Shop was in downtown Scranton, and they had a copy. And by golly, yes, a lot of folks remember that. The person there was a musicologist, and he said, yes, boys were from Scranton, Pennsylvania. And I played this thing a couple times, and I didn't know if I liked it or not. It was really, really different. But of course, the sales were there, the album sold, it spawned a second album, and of course, 42 years later, the Glass Prism still making music. There's an adage that reads, you can never go back. But tonight, we'll try and dispel that myth, because it is 1970, and this is Resurrection. It's 1964. The British invasion is underway. A young man has been accepted at the Berklee School of Music in Boston. Elvis is no longer rocking. Jerry Lee Lewis, Little Richard, Chuck Berry, and Buddy Holly are no longer on the top 40 charts. When the Beatles arrive on the scene, their occasional atonal music surprises and intrigues everyone. The young man decides to stay home a little longer with his bandmates. Seems he won't be shipping up to Boston lately. By 1968, he is searching for a song, and the lost poet is searching for a melody. Self-destructive, melancholic, and usually dressed in black, Edgar Allan Poe was the rock star of American literature in the 1800s. While most writers of his time strove for the appearance of middle-class respectability, Poe was touched by scandal from his earliest days until his death, the circumstances of which remain unresolved. With lyrics based on Edgar Allan Poe's poems and stories, the Glass Prism became the originators of progressive rock in the 1960s. A unique learning experience is available to all by listening to the albums Poe to the Glass Prism and Glass Prism, Edgar Allan Poe, Resurrection. Witness the spectacle that is the unmatched beauty and genius of Edgar Allan Poe merged with the creativity and power of the Glass Prism. On this very night, the 160